Hi, this is John Delancey, and you are listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Don't drink the water, the wine, and probably don't touch anything. This week we are discussing Arsenic and Old Lace, directed by Frank Capra, starring Cary Grant, Elaine Harbour, Raymond Massey, Peter Lorre, Josephine Hill, and Gene Ader. Filmed in 1941, but it wasn't released until 1944, so not to compete with the ongoing stage version. Mortimer Brewster, a drama critic known for mocking marriage, surprises everyone by marrying Elaine Harper, the minister's daughter who lives next door. After the wedding, he visits his beloved aunts, Abby and Martha Brewster, at their Brooklyn home. To his horror, Mortimer discovers a corpse hidden in the window seat. The kindly old ladies calmly explain that they help lonely old men by serving them elderberry wine laced with arsenic and cyanide. Their brother Teddy, who believes he is Theodore Roosevelt, digs graves in the cellar, thinking he's working on the Panama Canal to bury the victims. So far, they've killed 12 men. As Mortimer struggles to process this madness, his long-lost brother Jonathan, a violent criminal, returns home with his accomplice Dr. Einstein, no relation. Jonathan plans to use the house as a hideout and adds his own body to the chaos. His botched plastic surgery makes him look like Boris Karloff, and that becomes a running joke. The house descends into farce, with policemen wandering in, bodies being hidden and shifted, and Mortimer desperately trying to protect Elaine from discovering the truth. In the end, Jonathan is arrested, Teddy is committed to a sanitarium, and Mortimer learns he was adopted, meaning he doesn't share the Brewsters' family streak of madness. Relieved, he happily reunites with Elaine to begin their married life. On release, the film was universally praised, and that has only increased in years since. For example, AFI listed it at number 30 on their 100 Years, 100 Laughs list, and it currently has an 86 on Rotten Tomatoes. Cary Grant, though, wasn't as positive. He said he thought his performance was way too over the top, and wished Jimmy Stewart played his role. Was Cary Grant being too harsh on himself? Does it really truly stand up to the test of time? Back to Kevin and myself to discuss.
Hello and welcome to episode 226 of the Cinema Geeks. I am one of your Cinema Geeks, Optimus Solo, and joining me, as always, is the Comic Concierge. Hello, Dan.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to get back at our Cary Grant retrospective. I guess it's kind of fitting because I know this is going to date the podcast for people that listen to it like months or years from now or whatever may be the case, but in all of the stores, there are Halloween decorations and costumes out. So, like, this is our journey into the spooky realm, I guess. I don't know. It's not that spooky, but I know some people think it is. It definitely has some tones to it with, like, the graveyard, and obviously there's death and murder, and there's definitely a very fall feel to this. I know they brought in a lot of different, like, leaves and, like, stuff to kind of make the setting seem spooky. And then there's like the weird witch like image at the end of the film, which I know some people think that the characters in here are witches if they haven't seen the film. Like, I guess there's that vibe out there that they think there's going to be something more supernatural happening here, but I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves. But what is your background? I know we talked about it briefly at the end of the episode, but for those that haven't tuned into that episode, what's your background with Arsenic and Old Lace? What did you kind of come to this watch with? And what was your experience with both the play and the film prior to this?
Oh, yeah, this is one I have seen before. It's been a while, though. It's been like over 10 years since I've seen it. But before that, before I actually even saw the film, I didn't do the play per se, but we read it, and we kind of did like a reenactment of the play in one of my English classes, and actually in high school. And so we all kind of got parts, one of those things, and kind of someone said the stage directions, and I played the part of Teddy. So that part is still near and dear to my heart, and it's one of those things that still sticks with me for some reason, because going into it, you're thinking, oh, this is play from the 1940s. You're in high school. You're like, oh, this is going to be so it's not going to be funny. It's not going to hold up. And I remember like thinking like this hilarious. Like I can't believe this is actually about what it's about. So yeah, so I was eager to we watch it because I remember when I finally did sit down and see the movie, I ended up really enjoying it, and so I was excited to see if my memory was correct, and then considering we've seen so many more Cary Grant performances and things like that, if like how it compared now that I've watched more of his career. So how about yourself? I believe you said you were actually in Arsenic and Old Lace play.
Yes. So this was the first play that I was ever in. I did like 4 community theater plays, 2 of them as like the quote unquote high school plays, I guess you could call it, or the high school productions. And then 2 after high school is just like, just community theater stuff because I had an itch that I wasn't done scratching yet. So this was the first play that I ever appeared in. It was kind of a new thing to all of us. Like it was weird. I think we had been, there was other plays that had happened around us and school plays and community plays and things like that. But it was weird because there was a group of me and my classmates / friends that maybe it just had never dawned on us that like we were the right age to like actually participate in something like this ourselves. So it was interesting because typically there was a certain crowd that was involved in the plays. In our time going to high school, there was a lot of like different, I don't want to say cliques, but there was basically, like you had your jocks, you had your different, different things, right? And like there was a certain group that did the drama, and we were not necessarily part of that group. And there was a whole bunch of us that decided to try out for the play at the same time, and it was really kind of interesting because I feel like it opened it up for a lot more folks to like think, hey, it's not like something that we should be making fun of, or it's not something. Sometimes people like cast aspersions for people that like stuff that's not mainstream, and it was like, here's a bunch of people that are from different groups in the high school that are all trying out for it, and it was like, hey, maybe we can like give this a shot. I think kind of, not that we had that intention at all, but like I feel like that's kind of like what happened. And yeah, I got to play the character of Jonathan Brewster in this. So I don't know what that says that you're like, I know which one you'll be good as the casting for. But yeah, that's how that happened. So I definitely can relate to this. One thing that I was interested in, because I did watch the film at that time, because I didn't know if that was like a thing you should do or a thing you shouldn't do, but it was like, this is a 1944 film and a even earlier play. And I'm like, I feel like I need something to like understand where we're going. So I watched the film ahead of that kind of venture. So we're talking about, the late 1990s when I watched this. So it's been over 25 years since I saw it. And I was interested too to go back because number one, there's a bunch of these other films that I saw, whether it be, when I was still in high school or when I was going through the AFI list with my mom in college, that we've gone back and some of them, my memories have held up, and some of them maybe not as much. Like we just talked about one, like the Philadelphia Story, where I'm like, man, I thought I really liked that the first time I watched it. And now it's not that I dislike it, but it just didn't quite hit what I remember it to be. And so I was like, is Arsenic and Old Lace going to be that way too? Am I going to be able to separate my experience with it and kind of the inner knowledge? Like there's no way to not know, like to forget about a play or like the lines or whatever when you practice and perform it as many times as you have to for that type of thing. Like, we're talking about a couple months of memorizing lines and things like that. And I want to say that we had at least 8 performances of it. I want to say it was maybe 2 weekends of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, and 2 on Sunday, or something like that. So it's like, it's definitely ingrained in your head. One thing that I'll kind of let out now before I go into our opinions of the film, one thing that I learned on this watch, though, I was under the impression, and I watched it back then too, so it should have been like fresh in my mind, but I watched it back then. But there was a bunch of stuff that I thought the director and or the cast came up with, like clever ideas and things that would make certain things funnier or like play better for the audience. And I'm not saying we didn't come up with a few of those things, but now watching the film, I'm like, I feel like half the things I thought were clever things we came up with were in the film. So I don't think anybody was that clever. Somebody watched the film and was like, we should put that in there. And I was too like oblivious to realize we were just taking exactly what happened in the film. Cause I was waiting for the couple things and I'm like, oh, I remember we did this instead. And then I'm like, oh, they did that too. So that was kind of interesting. So obviously it's been a while for both of us, and it's kind of another interesting thing because there hasn't been a ton of films in either of our last two retrospectives that we both came with like a prior knowledge of. A lot of them have been blind spots for at least one of us, if not both of us. So this is an interesting one that we both have history with. So 10 years for your case, at least 25 years at least for myself after the fact. This film has a lot of different things going for it that we've kind of discussed in the past, whether it be films that have been based on plays. We've seen a bunch of those happen, and we've obviously had conversations of if you can tell or not that it was based on a play, based on the setting, based on how it's filmed, and some things like that. And certain ones maybe perform better as a play, and others maybe perform better as a film. But what was your take after all these other years seeing Arsenic and Old Lace, and did it live up to what you remembered? Did you like it more or less? How did it work? And as we kind of, like you said, put the backdrop of our Cary Grant experience so far.
Yeah, so I have a blast watching this. I thought it was still holds up. Like the dark humor at times is so good. It is very big with the comedy. Even Cary Grant, like his face is like Jim Carrey-esque and how like how dynamic he gets at times, and like, he utilizes that a great deal. It is a very broad in that, but I think there are also some smart moments as well. And like you mentioned, cleverness. There's a lot of cleverness within that too, within those big ideas. And to me, this is just a joy. I do feel like as I'm watching this, I'm like, this would be a better experience with a crowd. Like it just feels like if you're around a lot of people laughing, because there's so many like points, I feel like it'd be even enhanced in that type of experience. Like if this was ever like really re-released in theaters, I would definitely go see it with a group, because I feel like even then it just begs to be seen with other people, compared to like myself just watching it at home in the dark, laughing by myself. But still, it's not as fun. But I had a great time with it. I think it still holds up really well, and I really have no complaints about it. Like I think there's maybe hits to Nick or whatever you want to call it. But I love there's even like meta commentary at times. There's Cary Grant is just having a ball. They all really are, and so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, it was funny, and it moves really quick. Like it's not as like breakneck pace as like His Girl Friday maybe, or like Bringing Up Baby, but still it moves from scene to scene really well. It doesn't really let up in a bad way. So, and I love that there's so many good running jokes and everything like that. So I don't know, I had a good time watching it. Was happy to rewatch it again. Just as funny the second time. There's a lot of things I forgot about that I was I was surprised about on my rewatch. But how about yourself? Considering that you've probably experienced this a whole lot more than I have.
Yeah, so a couple things that came to my mind. First, I just want to touch on this before I forget, because you made a good point about how it kind of goes around at a pretty good pace. Obviously, like you said, not maybe like warp speed, but it's a 2-hour film, and it doesn't feel like it's 2 hours, in my opinion. Like there was never moments where I was like, okay, like let's move on to this part, or like it continues to go, and like it keeps you. It's not just that it's moving at a decent pace, but it also is keeping you interested on the next turn, or the next, like, where does it go from here? How are they going to react to this? Because it is a film where the characters are getting interrupted a lot, right? Like there's a lot of different situations where characters are trying to do something and getting interrupted by this, that, and the other, whether it be a family member, whether it be the police at the door, whatever the case may be. And because of that, you're always like waiting to see how the different threads continue and get tied up and stuff like that. So it's not just that it's moving at a decent pace, but it does a good job of keeping your interest as far as like seeing how the story evolves. So I do appreciate that. I think you bring up a good point. I would take it a step further. I don't just think this would be better to watch in a theater with a group. I think it would actually, like, I still think this may be best seen as a play. And that is not like saying anything bad about the film. But I just think when you're if you could take a group of people that know nothing about this and then take them to a production of this live and be there experiencing the reactions and the laughs from all the different people as they see the antics here. I think that's like where you get like the best experience with this one. And I know you can say that probably about a lot of different plays, that like it's really fun to be there in person, but I think this one, like especially like being able to see the audience's reaction and stuff, that was like one of the most entertaining things about being in the play. Like, we're high school students, like we're not actors, right? Like we're not skilled in any way, shape, or form. But it was so gratifying, like doing stuff and then hearing the audience's reactions and the laughs. And I feel like you get that whether you're part of the play or whether you're part of the audience. And so I do think that maybe it's best seen as an actual play, but it's also they did a pretty good job of adapting it to the screen, I think. And obviously it helps that they have some of the actual actors from Broadway. Believe it. Yeah, it was Broadway. They have at least 3 of the cast members from the Broadway play in this film, so obviously that helps. I enjoyed my experience with this one. I do think it's interesting to see Cary Grant in this film after everything else we've seen, because like you said, he is very over the top, right? And he's acting like we've seen this in some of his other stuff where he does a lot of physical acting, like from looks, facial expressions, body language, and things like that. Like we've seen that on a smaller scale in a bunch of his other films. But this is like, if you want to see the prime example of him doing that, it's this film. Like he is doing so much with his eyes, so much with his facial expressions. Like this is like, if you were like to dissect the different tools in Cary Grant's toolbox and you had like a half a dozen of them or whatever we came up with, the physical acting would be one of those, and this would be the film that I point to as like the prime example of him doing that. So I really thought that was interesting, and I don't know, I think it would have been interesting to had we done the Cary Grant retrospective before we did the Hitchcock retrospective. I'm very curious as to how that would have landed for me, because I feel like we did it in the right order almost. Like I like the fact that we got to see some of his more serious, not serious, but like the thrilling stuff, I guess you can call it serious, in the Hitchcock. And then we got to see, you know, some of the just craziness so far with His Girl Friday and Bringing Up Baby. Obviously we got a really serious one with Penny Serenade, so you throw that in there. But then we get this, which is, it may not be unhinged, like I said, with Bringing Up Baby, but he is acting just as like over the top and comedic as you can possibly get with Cary Grant.
Yeah.
What do you think about the order that we kind of watched that and how that plays into like our opinions of Cary Grant?
Yeah, I could see this is it's funny because this was probably the first Cary Grant movie I watched, and I didn't at the time think it felt fitting for that age. I think if anything, I probably just dismissed it because it's like, oh, it's the 1940s, and that's kind of, you always played to the back of the theater, and that's what he was doing, especially considering this is actually a play. But if this was, now, if I watched it today, like you said before, if we were to do a retrospective, we started with this, I still think he would think he was funny, but certainly it'd be like, okay, maybe he needs to tone it down a little bit on occasion, because there are some times where it's like, it's almost like Looney Tunes-esque in his expressions. And even like, I know I was, reading up about it, and like, even like Cary Grant, like he hates his performance in this. I think he's a little too harsh on himself, and that, a lot of actors often are. Mm-hmm. But I could get where that's coming from, because when you compare this to something like His Girl Friday, where it's much more reserved, like he's much sharper, and like he does have those like facial expressions, but they're like kind of reserved for the right moment. Where here are just all the time, and like his eyes get so big, like especially like early on once the body is discovered, and that like that whole sequence. But there's also, I think, just moments of like brilliance in that too, like when they're going through it all, and then like his brother shows up, and again they're going to look into the whatever you call that thing, like the not a casket, but
I know what you're talking about.
The big container where the body is, and he goes over there, and so does his brother, and like just the emotions he goes through in that moment, like I thought that was brilliant. I thought like, okay, like he's going through so much, and the glee that like it's just, I thought that was great. So yeah, like I could, but with that being said, there are some times where it's like, okay, maybe we can like go from 11 to like 9 or 8 here and there. So like the one scene where they're almost like breaking the fourth wall. He's talking about a play he went to and like how the character was interacting, and like just like that was a little big, but
right.
So like I said, I felt it was the material within itself is kind of ludicrous and over the top. You have a character that's Teddy Roosevelt yelling in charge every time he goes up the stairs. So you remember when we talked about bringing up Baby and how there wasn't like a normal character, there wasn't like a normal person. I think that's the case for this movie. I think you could kind of lodge that same complaint, if you want to call it a complaint, where there isn't like a normal person in this. Everyone is a bit quirky or strange. So in order to stand out in a way, you kind of have to act accordingly.
Yeah.
And I just also love the juxtaposition between his character, and his brother, who's basically this walking Frankenstein serial killer. Like it felt, I think Looney Tunes is like, it felt like Bugs Bunny going up against like some monster in a way, just like how different their approaches are. But I don't know. How about yourself?
A couple of things. Number one, I wanted to touch on at least two things that you brought up there. Cary Grant saying it was one of his worst performances and it was too over the top and things of that nature. A couple of things on that. Number one, it seemed like I read different reports, and I don't know if they're conflicting or if they're kind of together, but one that he was almost not demanding, but he was requesting reshoots on some of the stuff so that they could tone down a few moments here and there. I also read that Frank Capra, the director, was doing the same. So I don't know if one of those reports is true and one is false, or if they're both true, that they were both wanting to do reshoots to try to because they acknowledged that there was a few moments where they maybe had gone too far. And I think that's mostly on Frank Capra's direction. He wanted them to go, bananas. But then, after the fact, it seemed like they at least acknowledged that maybe they should bring it back a bit. But to give you kind of like more information on the filming of this, the filming of this is a crazy story, right? So they filmed this in 1941, 42 era, and I think it was supposed to be released in the fall of 42, but they couldn't do that because the play was still running. And there was an agreement that if the play was still running, they would delay the release, or they wouldn't release until the play was done. And they didn't expect the play to be as successful as it was. So the film doesn't come out for an extra 2 years. Like, it just sits there waiting to be released until 1944. And then you also have to put into context like what we're going through, in our world during that time.
Yeah.
So, and Frank Capra, I believe it was after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, enlists in the armed forces. I don't remember which branch it was, but he enlists, and they give him like an extension or something so he can try to finish the film. But I read somewhere where that kind of squashed any reshoots that they were thinking about doing to tone any of that down, because he needed to get it done quickly so he could, go off to war, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's just like a crazy instance where, maybe they did have plans to tone some of that down, but then they never got to it for, those types of reasons. So I find interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I get the priorities, of course, because war's happening, you're kind of limited on what you can do. So, and I wonder too if like that, I didn't know that going into it, right? I didn't. Even though I watched it before, I try not to look at reviews or information before and just to go in. But even like watching it, it's like, this does seem a bit. He's a little bit like he's having a good time here, and then going back and seeing his reaction to it, I'm like, okay, I understand where that's coming from, because it's a very different performance. Of all the movies we've done so far, I don't think there's anyone I would say he acts like this in any other film we've done. So
Yeah, and I did read somewhere too that like there was some of that Frank Capra was really trying to bring out of him that he wasn't even comfortable with, that he was like really pushing him to kind of push that envelope and things of that nature. I did find it funny too that in that same interview or quote from Cary Grant that actually throws somebody out that he said he thought would have been better for the role. I don't know if you read the same quote or not, but
No.
because have experience with him, I want to get your take because a lot of times when you hear, you have a famous movie that somebody does it, and then you hear who else was considered for the cast or this, that, and the other. And a lot of times you go into that, I can't see anybody else doing it but him type of thought process. In this one, I almost can see it. He said that Jimmy Stewart would have been better for this. I'm not saying he would have been better. I'm not saying I would change it, but I can totally see Jimmy Stewart playing a role like this.
Yeah, I think it would be, certainly would be different. Like, like I feel like Jimmy Stewart's comedy, which he doesn't like. I'm trying to think of he doesn't do a lot of comedy throughout his career. I feel like it would be more reserved. I'd be interested in seeing it because I feel like it would be a very different performance.
Right, it would be an interesting take.
He currently he's a great actor. I feel like he's much more understated with his performances. Even looking at,
I can see him getting riled up though, like the way that we see him get riled up and stuff like that. I can see that aspect definitely shining here.
Yeah, it would. I don't know. It's I guess I wonder if it would be more comparable to what the play was.
Yeah,
where Cary Grant's much more vaudeville. That's where he comes from. And Jimmy Stewart's more classic actor. Where maybe he could bring some more to those scenes. But yeah, that would be interesting. I think I could see it. I certainly could see him doing it, and him being. I could imagine the scene of him finding out that his answer to serial killers and just the confusion and frustration and disbelief that would go through his head. That I definitely could see him killing a scene like that.
Yeah, I don't think he was ever considered. I didn't read that anywhere. That's just from Cary Grant himself. The other people that were considered for this role, though, just to throw some names out here: Jack Benny, Bob Hope, and Ronald Reagan. So
that's a weird list of people.
So obviously, from Jack Benny and Bob Hope's standpoint, they were really going for the comedic aspects of that. I don't have enough experience with Ronald Reagan's filmography to say. I don't know. I know he did some westerns. I don't know what else he did. So
yeah, I feel like Bob Hope would be he would I did watch my parents watched a lot of Bob Hope growing up. It would have been. It would have been super over the top with him, and probably he loved to break the fourth wall. So I'm certain those moments we got, he would really lean into. So
yeah. Another thing that you mentioned that I wanted to come back to is you talked about the normal man or the normal person that you can either ground the thing or that you can relate to. I know when we did the play, I felt like that was Elaine Harper. That was that person.
Oh yeah, that's
in
true.
A way, we played it a little bit different than they do in the movie as well. She played a much bigger part in our play than she does in the movie. But she's the one that kind of comes in and is not part of the family, is not part of the chaos, and is trying to be y'all are crazy. What's going on?
Yeah, that's a good point. I completely not forgot about her character, but she's literally thrown to the side so often. But that is a valid point that was the one person they kept trying to bring into kind of normal, just give us something to be oh, okay, these things are a bit crazy.
And she is toned down a bit in this movie too, because of, I know we've talked about it a couple times as we've gone through this Cary Grant filmography, but the Hays Code, as far as playing a part and kind of influencing things, they were forced to play down. There's supposed to be a decent presence of, I guess you could call it sexual frustration between Mortimer and Elaine that's kind of fueling some of the chaoticness and some of the, the desire to get this wrapped up in a quick manner and things of that nature that the Hays Code did not allow. So they definitely had to tone that down, which I think somewhat muted her presence and performance in the film a little bit. As far as what I remember in the play, not that we didn't play that up a lot in the high school play either, but I do remember it being there as far as something that was there. Another thing I wanted to quickly touch on, just to go to a couple other characters, the three characters that transfer from the Broadway production to the film are the two aunts. So we have Aunt Abby and Aunt Martha. Those are the people that played this on Broadway as well. And Teddy, who is played by John Alexander. Those are the three that come over from the Broadway production to the film, which I think is cool. Boris Karloff was in the Broadway play. Obviously, they use his name in the film, which is a reference because that's who's playing the character in the Broadway production. He was not allowed to come over or be released for this because he was the top billing on the play. So where Cary Grant gets top billing on the film and Mortimer Brewster's character, it was actually Jonathan Brewster that got top billing on the play because of Boris Karloff's fame or celebrity status or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if it was just strictly because of that or because they just weren't willing to let all of the cast off and use all substitutes. I know that they threw some different names out that could have played him on that they suggested for the Broadway play while they let him do this. But he was obviously not allowed to do this, which I guess he wasn't super happy about. But he also owned rights to the play, so he was making royalties off of the play for a long time. And then when Arsenic and Old Lace became, I believe, a TV adaptation later on, he did get to play Jonathan Brewster finally in that as well. So it's kind of cool, I guess, that they put the Karloff line in there because they're definitely referring to that. And I guess the guy that does play Jonathan Brewster, Raymond Massey, the amount of makeup that they had to put on, like it was one of those situations where we're talking about hours of makeup that they put on before he's allowed to, go into the filming. And I read somewhere too, and I didn't catch this when I was watching, but I guess you can watch every single one of his close-ups in this film and he never blinks. I did not get that for the play, so I definitely was blinking. I also didn't have any close-ups, but I do remember having a scar put on me a very noticeable, and obviously you have to really exaggerate it when you're on a stage because nobody can see you. So I had this gigantic scar on my face that they had to paint on to me every day, which I thought was cool because I got to go in with the makeup people, which were all female, and they got to put my scar on, and that was cool for a 17-year-old boy. Anyway,
Nice.
But what was your take on the aunts and Teddy? Your familiarity with that role, and then kind of the Jonathan Brewster role.
I mean, I think he did the part of Teddy justice. I thought I did a little bit better. Probably not. But he was great. I think the aunts are everything in this movie. They are the entire film revolves around just their dynamic. They're perfect. So I'm so glad that I couldn't imagine anyone else doing those roles. I mean, sure you get some people, but it's just their laissez-faire attitude towards everything, and just I don't know. It was the best comedy came from them easily. So I think they were certainly the stars of the show, and I don't know. They're just so many great just near the end, of course, when they're going through. But there are 13 bodies in the in just
cellar, yeah.
Their performances are so perfect because they have to, they don't play for laughs. It kind of reminds me of Leslie Nielsen and when he's really good at Naked Gun, where he's playing it straight. They aren't being comedic in their performances. They're dead serious in the way they're approaching it. It's just it's just how ludicrous everything is that it works. So the fact that they aren't self-aware, I think, is so important in how well the movie works. And again, if you just had a movie, I want a prequel of just all the people that come in, a TV episode of just all the people they just randomly kill. I could have sworn, just my memory, that we got more about those individuals by the end, but not. We didn't.
I thought there was more. Maybe we just added them. I don't know. I feel like there was at least one more situation where we had in the play that we did, that adaptation, where we had another gentleman at some point. I thought it was maybe towards the end. Yeah. I think we ended it slightly different, and we had another person come in at the end that they were serving. Well, I don't know. There was something like that. I know in the original, I believe the play ends, if I'm remembering it correctly, that it doesn't end with Mortimer running off and just declaring he's a bastard and celebrating that fact. But it ends with the aunts poisoning whoever was taking them away, or somebody at the sanitarium or something happens where they actually get to go free or something like, or they're killing the person that's going to, take them down or whatever. There was something like that. So it had a slightly different ending that I think they were, had to switch again for Hays Code type stuff towards the end of this one to make it work. I forgot all about the baseball thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
I had no recollection that there's even part of this. I forget that there's for those that don't know, like this opens up with a baseball sequence and then they just start like beating the crap out of each other.
At first I thought I had the wrong movie. I'm like, wait, is this a different version? I completely forgot about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is also somewhat weird because then it's like across town in like a, perfectly nice neighborhood and, the juxtaposition, but then this is supposed to be taking place at Halloween, but Brooklyn's playing baseball. Probably not happening at October 31st at that time. I don't know. Like things have changed nowadays. I guess they play sometimes into November. It seems like so. I forgot that even existed 100% for sure. I read somewhere about some. I know you talked a little bit about some meta things and things like that. I read that there was these people that had done a Capra biography, maybe if I'm remembering correctly, but they were digging into the meaning of the play. And I want to see if you picked up on any of this because I certainly did not. And I've been in the play and I've watched the movie a couple times and this is news to me. But I can also kind of make the connection and see it. If that was intentional or not, I don't know. But they were talking about the play's meaning and the movie's meaning to be somewhat representative of America. And by saying that you have this like picture perfect house with like the nice ants and all of this stuff, but there's 13 bodies in the cellar. And America is oftentimes, especially, back in the day, presented as this beacon of freedom and this like everybody can come and chase their American dream and everything's nice and hunky dory in America, but in America's cellar is all of its violent past as far as things that it's done to get to that point. Did you pick up on that at all, or can you see that being an intentional meaning behind this crazy comedy of a film?
I honestly did not pick that up at all going through it, but I can certainly see it. And also, I mean, you look at the connection to Teddy Roosevelt, you bring up the Panama Canal, and certainly that was an achievement that also led to a lot of deaths, like, them bringing up yellow fever and stuff was a very real element of that. But going through it, like I wasn't searching for meaning. I wasn't searching for, it was, and perhaps that was just a mistake on my part, or, I was just, with everything being so big and so in your face, nothing seemed like a subtle reference to something else in going through it. So that if that was the intention, it didn't really hit hard to me. I could see where it comes from, but I don't know if watching it, like you get that impression at all. Right. I didn't.
I did not either. I can see how it lines up with that, but I can't see that was like, if that was the intention, I don't think they necessarily played to that very much as far as that goes. This does have an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, fairly good score there. It was rated number 30 for AFI's 100 Years, 100 Laughs that they did in the year 2000. So obviously some respect for it when it comes to that. I just had a couple more, like, I don't know how to get this in a natural conversation, so I'm just going to add a couple trivia bits here because I just think they're interesting. So we've seen this a little bit before I can't remember if it was His Girl Friday, I believe it was, where Cary Grant references Archie Leach's name, which is his real name, and he says something about it. It was either His Girl Friday or Bringing Up Baby. I think it was His Girl Friday that he brings it up. In this one, there's actually a tombstone. The Brewsters live like basically by a cemetery to add to the creepiness of it. And apparently there's a tombstone you can see in one of the sequences or cuts or whatever, and Archie Leach's is the name on the actual tombstone. So there's another way that they bring his real name into it, I guess. So I thought that was somewhat interesting. The other thing, this is kind of a sad note, I guess, but because it takes so long for this film to release with the extra couple of years that they were waiting on it, 3 of the characters in the film don't actually survive to see the film released. Sergeant Brophy and the marriage license official and Gibbs, who is one of the older gentlemen, they all pass away before the film actually gets released. So I guess that's the downside of having to wait that much longer for the film to get released. And then the last thing from a trivia standpoint, Mr. Witherspoon, who is in this film is he the head of the sanitarium? Yes.
He's
Yeah. So the guy that comes to take Teddy to Happy Dale, it's played by an actor named Edward Everett Horton. And for those that are like voice actor enthusiasts, he's the narrator on the original, on the 1959 The Bullwinkle Show.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And he also narrated a animated series called Fractured Fairy Tales, but most people would recognize The Bullwinkle Show. So he was the narrator from that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to keep your ear open for if you decide to watch this one. So, Dan, number 30 for 100 Years, 100 Laughs. Does that make sense to you? Does that track? Do you feel like it deserves a place in the top 100 most comedic films of all time?
I think so. I 100%. I think it belongs up there. Like I said, it's still, I think a lot of the comedy holds up. It's certainly, like we mentioned, it can be a little bit big at times, but I still laughed a good amount. Some really great moments. So, like, one of my favorite moments was when you have that final battle, or the fighting of all the cops and everything, and Cary Grant's just like his like, he's so just over it. And like one of my favorite things is a little small moment where the cop goes to hit his brother over the head with something. He's like, "That's not going to work," and then Daddy's like, "Oh, I guess it will." It's just like, it's just so, it's just the dismissive and like, oh, like just the small realization. I thought that was like his best line reading in the entire thing, because it was just, he was it was such a smaller moment and stuff like that compared to everything else. I just thought I laughed so hard at that line. It's like, oh, I guess it will.
He finds a way to get those little lines, like a side lines. Like, it's just these little lines to the side that he just kind of throws in under his breath that none of the other characters in the film are hearing. But we're privy to it, and he always does a good job of delivering those lines. I think that's fantastic. I forgot to bring up, and I feel like we can't not mention him, so I just want to get your take on Peter Lorre, who we've seen a couple different times, I think, in the different retrospectives we've done so far. He's obviously playing Dr. Einstein, which is the henchman to the main villain, Jonathan Brewster. And the reason I thought of him was because you were talking about kind of moments that really kind of tickled your funny bone or whatever. And I feel like the last time we see Dr. Einstein and Peter Lorre playing the doctor, coming in there while they're giving the description over the phone of what the doctor looks like and all of these different things. And he's like basically holding his hands out ready for the cuffs to be put on. And of course he gets to get off scot-free. I'm not sure if that's one of our criminals definitely does get away with murder, but and stuff like that. But what was your take on Peter Lorre and his performance?
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I didn't think they were allowed to do that. I completely forgot he was in this. And again, probably maybe the most recognizable face in the history of Hollywood, just like history of movies, because I think there's no one's ever looked quite like him.
And his voice too.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought he was great. Like, I thought it was, I don't know. Was this before Frankenstein movie? I can't think of when those came out. But like him against a character that looks just like Frankenstein, and he kind of has that Igor presence. I think it was really well. But he was great. Like, again, similar thing. It deadpan humor. He wasn't trying to be funny, but often really was. So I was always happy to see him show up in a movie.
And obviously, most people probably know him from Casablanca, like you said, some of the different Frankenstein, that type of stuff. He was in one of the Hitchcock films that we didn't cover, which was
The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original.
Correct.
He wasn't. He was in the original, which I don't think I still have yet to see that, but
I have not either. So that's interesting. But yeah, I thought, Peter Lorre is great in this, and he's just so, like, I feel like that's an impersonation that people do that don't even know who they're doing an impersonation of.
Yeah, very true.
They've heard it so many times that they just do it. And then and I feel like we've seen it too, like in cartoons and different like comedies where we didn't even realize who was being like spoofed or paying homage to or whatever, or copied, I guess you could say. So, what was the last thing I forgot to mention, kind of goes with what we've heard about Cary Grant here. There's varying reports. Some people say he made 100,000 for this film. Some people say he made upwards of 160,000. No matter, there's like 3 different reports that talk about his money and what he did with it and how much he made. The only consistent thing out of all the different reports is he at least made 100,000 and he at least donated 100,000.
Oh,
so he may have made 160 and donated 100. That's one of the reports. Another report says he made 100 and donated all of it. And then there's one that's like somewhere in between those two. And it was like a variety of different things between the, I think there was like the British War Relief thing. There was something with the, on America's side where I don't remember if it was Red Cross or if it's some other charitable donation like that and different things. So like, it seems like we've seen that at least 2 or 3 times now where he's gotten a decent paycheck and donated a portion of it that you would not think would be the case, like from in our world today. Like you can't see as many people just doing that. I don't think. Maybe there's a few out there that are that charitable, but he's definitely got a big time charitable bone in him.
I guess you could say like George Lucas, because when he sold Star Wars, didn't he donate all that?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a nice thing to see from somebody of that fame.
Yeah. I mean, Cary Grant's such an interesting figure. And you do wonder, like, because he, of course, like he was kind of born to be a star. And then just some of the things he did, it just makes you wonder kind of where his thoughts and like apart, you wonder like if he liked Hollywood, but then he would do things like that, and he clearly loved doing like movies and stuff. I don't know, but it seems
I feel like he genuinely liked the
performing
craft. Like he liked performing, he liked acting. I don't know if he liked Hollywood.
True.
Well. You know what I mean? Or at least that, like the glitz and glam aspect of it. Like it's hard to say because he was so like he is like the icon and the Hollywood star. But I feel like he was someone who genuinely loved performing and acting, which obviously like you said, that's where he came up with the vaudeville background and stuff. Which reminds me of my last note. I promise I keep remembering more things because there's just so much to this film. Gina Dare, who plays Aunt Martha, actually knew Cary Grant beforehand as Archie Leach when he was in vaudeville, and I guess at one point like Cary Grant was not doing so well and like sickly and things like that, and I read that Gina Dare actually nursed him back to health and like got him back on his feet and like got him healthy again, and this was like 20 years prior to this.
Oh wow.
And then he like comes across her again in this film and they get to play together, so it's just a weird connection that like they knew each other from his vaudeville days. So that then Gina Dare is the taller of the 2 ants for those that are getting the 2 ants confused. That's the taller one. So final thoughts, Dan, on Arsenic and Old Lace?
Like I said, I had a great time with it. It's a really good comedy. I think it's also like if you have, I didn't watch this with my kids, but I feel like if I did, they would enjoy it. Obviously, you deal with some darker stuff, but I think it's done in a cartoonish manner. It is basically a living cartoon, and I could see what you're saying regarding it being better in play form, and that certainly makes sense because it does feel like they're performing for an audience that's in front of them, and like they're kind of begging for that interaction and that give and take. So I certainly
there's a lot of physical comedy too with it, right? Like there's the chair that gets knocked over, there's the fights, there's the phone aspect during there's a lot of that I feel like seeing live plays a tiny bit better.
Mm-hmm. I definitely could see that, but still I had a good time. It was interesting seeing Cary Grant like in that type of role and like with this performance after her Penny Serenade. This was a nice reprieve from that, getting a little bit more back to comedy for a bit. So yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. It is available for free on Internet Archive. So because I don't think it's streaming, but you can buy it and rent it too. But Internet Archive is currently there, so it can cost you nothing.
I would also say if you're at all involved in any type of community or especially school that does plays, like this is an excellent one for you guys to choose to do. Like I feel like this is just one that the kids can get into. I feel like it plays well with the audience, and I feel like it introduces them to some of this like old school Hollywood and some of that type of stuff. But I think it's one that definitely sometimes some of the older plays that are just like the classics to go to for a lot of these places aren't always as good. And I think this one holds up. So I would definitely suggest doing this one. And you talk about, going back and forth from serious to comedies and in kind of the journey we've been through. I feel like we're going back maybe to the dramatic route with our next film, which also came out. And now it makes sense why these two both came out in 1944, because Arsenic and Old Lace was already in the can 2 years prior. But another film that came out in 1944 that starred Cary Grant was a film called None But the Lonely Heart. This is his second Academy Award nomination coming from this film, so I'm guessing it may be a touch more on the serious side, as that's what the Academy typically rewarded throughout the years. Dan, do you have any experience with None But the Lonely Heart?
I have zero. I know nothing about it. I've never seen it, so I'm going to try to go in keeping that, as much as possible. So seeing how well it holds up, or like what exactly I'm in store for. Like you said, I'm preparing for something that is more depressing and a bit more on the serious side, because the Oscars don't tend to award comedy very often. That's still the case today. So we'll see, though. Right.
We're also going from a film that we both saw to a film that both of us probably know as little about as is humanly possible. I know one thing about this film, and that is it stars Cary Grant and Ethel Barrymore, and that's it. I know nothing else about this. So I am definitely intrigued to see if it's along the lines of Penny Serenade or how it compares to that. But we'll have to wait until the next episode to kind of dive into that. Dan, if people want to keep up to date with you, how would they do that on the social medias?
Just search Comic Concierge on all the social medias and you could find me there.
Absolutely. You can search me out at Optimus Solo, or you can search the show out at the Cinema Geeks. You can also keep up to all the other stuff that happens on the website with the geekcastradio.com. So that does it for this episode. Tune in next time for another chance to listen to more of the Cinema Geeks.
Weight loss solutions are not one size fits all. Hers makes it simpler to get started and stick with a weight loss plan, backed by expert-guided online care that puts your weight loss goals first. These include oral medication kits or compounded GLP-1 injections. Through Hers, pricing for oral medication kits start at just $69 a month for a 10-month plan when paid in full upfront. No hidden fees, no membership fees. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. Hers brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first. Reach your weight loss goals with help through Hers. Get started at forhers.com/4u to access affordable, doctor-trusted weight loss plans. That's forhers.com/4u, forhers.com/4u. Paid for by Hims and Hers Health. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions at forhers.com apply.